Hi everyone, so today we'll be talking about consulting, and it's actually a great pleasure to welcome Kevin on the podcast to share his journey and experience in the consulting world. And I'm quite sure we'll get some very valuable insights into a world which seem quite oblivious from outside. So without further ado, Kevin, just join us and welcome on the podcast.
Hi, good to be here.
So before we dive into the topic, maybe you can just present yourself and your journey from your studies, so the stage at which most of us are, towards your current adventure, which you call the Chinese dream.
Sure. So I started studying at the University of Mannheim. I did my bachelor's there in business administration. And during my studies, I would be lying when I would be saying that, it was always my dream to get into consulting, and that has been my goal forever. But really, during my studies, I was the kind of person that was trying to get as much and as diverse experience as possible. So I did 6 internships and looked into everything from startup to banking to incubator to even law firm. And in the end, decided, or kind of this vision that I always had to get into entrepreneurship, I decided that this is the right thing for me, but I need some more. I need some more foundational knowledge, and I didn't feel quite ready yet. So I thought, what could you do? Probably consulting is a good choice to have a wide range of experience and build this strong technical foundation. So I did that, worked in a big strategy consulting firm for more than 3 years. During that time, I founded my funding accelerator with a couple of partners in Berlin, where we basically, what our mission was to get seed and pre-seed startups in touch with angel investors and venture capitalists. And that was kind of the thing that brought me close to China, because I always thought there must be so many opportunities in bringing the Chinese ecosystem and the European or even the German ecosystem closer together. And that's when I decided, after having founded this funding accelerator that is still running right now, but I kind of took myself out of the equation, to try to build a bridge between China and Germany. And this is how I came to partner with a local accelerator here in Shanghai. They are doing a lot of stuff, but what my mission is to build up their division that is responsible for helping foreign startups land and successfully scale in China. So that's what I'm doing right now. Next to my YouTube engagement, so I'm active on YouTube and giving advice for nascent management consultants, talking about what management consultants do, and trying to provide a very unbiased view on all of that. So no sugarcoating on my channel usually. And on the side, I'm active as a mentor to a couple of startups.
Great. That's actually how I discovered your interesting profile, was through YouTube, because the algorithm on social platforms pretty much know us pretty well, and they happen to propose your content to me. And just to come back to the knowledge side, it seems like you directly got into the direct world, or the active world, after your bachelor degree, and you didn't do any higher education or further education. Was it intentional, or you couldn't wait anymore to do something like tangible?
That was very intentional. Yeah. So I I think I have two reasons for that. The first one is I was always a very practical guy, so I valued practice over theory, and I realized during my studies also that it was much more fun for me to do all these internships and to build a network than to be studying in the library and looking at theoretical concepts. So that was the first reason that I thought, you should directly after your bachelor's, you should just try to get in somewhere and get some practical experience. The second reason is a very logical one. I think this could be a good step for many people, because if you manage to get into, for example, management consulting after your bachelor's degree, what will happen is most of these consulting firms will, of course, make sure you are able to study your master's degree at an prestigious school, plus they will pay for all the tuition fees. So you can either do that, or if you say you want to be even faster and skip a couple of lines, you could go for, after your bachelor's degree, join a strategy consulting firm, and then even don't do your master's, but do a typical MBA, as an add-on. And I promise that after you have your bachelor's and your MBA at a prestigious school, maybe even some Ivy League institution in the USA, nobody ever will ask for your master's degree. So these are the two reasons. These were the two main reasons for me.
Yeah, great. It makes a ton of sense. And regarding internships, actually, you got many of them. And how would you go about getting another one if it was like your next priority? And maybe how would you even make sure that you get a return offer?
So regarding internships, there's always two possibilities. You can go the official way, and then you can go the unofficial way. If you go the official way, you compete against a lot of people, and especially if it's a prestigious institution, it's very difficult. Even for people who have a very, very nice profile, there's always some risk that their application will simply not be received. Something went wrong, the application got skipped, and you don't receive an invitation. So I always recommend building a network. Ideally, start building a network years before you apply to the company that you target, which of course not always is possible. But generally, start building a network first, and start building a network during your studies, and then utilize and leverage that network in order to get into the companies that you want to get into. Of course, if you, let's say, go for investment banking as an example, you might be able to secure an interview through your network, but then what you do during the interview is totally up to you. So you still need to put in the work, still need to put in the diligence to learn about the company, learn about the interview processes. But going through a network really helps a lot.
Yeah, and actually you published really, really valuable insights, I think, on your LinkedIn one day regarding your lifestyle habits. And I noticed the one that was about getting in touch with like one person a day. And I just want maybe your quick take on the importance of soft skills when you try to enter maybe hard skills heavy industry. What's the importance of soft skills?
It's a very important differentiator. So especially for management consulting, a lot of very, very brilliant people apply. And I was doing some recruiting myself, and I was sitting across many, many highly brilliant people, very quick with numbers, very zero defect, as we call them, but some of them simply lacking the nuances of personal interaction. And that's a big it's a big no-go. So you don't have to be a big extrovert in consulting or even in business general. Like there are many, many introverts that are highly successful. But what is important is that you're able to sell yourself during personal interactions. And if you simply lack the basics, it gets very, very difficult to climb the career ladder.
Yeah, I planned to ask you about the biggest differentiator besides grades, but I think we just hammered the point right away. And maybe what did you wish you knew? What do you wish you knew or did while studying? Because I think that's a pretty golden era or golden period when you're studying. You have so much time and energy to just build something. So maybe what did you did on your side?
Yes. So for me personally, the biggest thing is I wish I knew that it is important to learn how to learn. So I always, like before entering studies and my bachelor's degree, I didn't really research or didn't really have a big plan on how to be successful at the university. That kind of developed after a couple of semesters, where I got more confident, and then I was reading about how to learn stuff actually, how to make these things stick in my brain. And that's something I did way too late, because if you want to do it the proper way, I would suggest before entering your studies, first of all, be very clear about that it's going to be lots of new materials. You were one of the best guys at your school, but now you're entering an institution where everybody who is there was the best guy or girl at his school, right? So it's highly competitive, and you need to find an edge for yourself. And also you want to make sure that all that stuff you learn is not just kind of you learn it for the exams and then afterwards you forget 90% of the things, which is unfortunately often the case, and maybe a fault of the overall education system that is prevalent in Europe. But you want to make sure that you develop the right techniques to really excel, of course, at the exams, but also keep as much of that knowledge as possible. That is my biggest. I wish I knew that a little bit earlier. Other than that, in terms of experience, practical experience, I'm very content with what I did. What I want to say is what I saw many of my, let's say, my friends at the university struggle with is build a network very first. So kind of what I said earlier already, university is a great time to build a network, because the people you are getting in touch with, and most of the time what you want to aim at is getting in touch with people who are more senior than you, right? Because they are more experienced, they can help you more. These more senior people, they don't see a student as a competition. So they are very willing to help you. Whereas if you, let's say, you get into consulting after your studies, and you want to network with consultants, senior consultants or partners from another consultancy, there's always the risk that they either consciously or subconsciously perceive yourself as competition, which is, of course, not nice if you want to network with them and build a long-lasting relationship with them. So this student stage is really a nice opportunity for you to build a good network of people who are willing to help you, because you're just a junior guy, unexperienced, and they may have some sympathy, they may see something in you, some potential, and they simply, want to develop it, and that's why they let you into their personal sphere and their personal network.
Yeah, totally. I can absolutely confirm that with my podcast experience, maybe a bit more than 20 interview experience I had in French. And most people just go out of their way to give value, share their insights, even trying to actively shortcut your learning curve because sometimes they've struggled with something and they want you to avoid this trap. And I think that's so great.
Yeah, totally. And you're also probably because many people then say, oh, I'm a student, I can't provide any value. As a matter of fact, probably you as a student can provide more value to highly senior people than if you are a little bit older, because the older you get, the more similar you get to these people you try to network with. Maybe you work in the same industry, you're just more junior and didn't climb the career ladder as far as this guy you're trying to network with. Whereas when you're a student, you have this totally fresh perspective on a lot of issues. You have this nice network to the university, to professors, to other students, which is also very valuable. So sometimes you're even able to provide more value because you're so junior and, let's be very rude, so unexperienced.
Yeah, totally. So now let's transfer to the more experienced side of the interview, the consulting interview, the consulting industry. Sorry. So we really want to get your insider's perspective. So based on your 3 years experience in the field, how would you define consulting in your own words? Because we've all heard about the typical, we help our clients overcome their most challenging obstacles and so on, which is super interesting on the micro perspective. But how would you translate it into more micro day-to-day perspective?
Yeah, so first of all, my macro definition would be consulting is like a practical master or MBA. So then, because that's what it was to me, I didn't want to do my theoretical master's degree. So I said, all these concepts that I'm going to learn about during my master's degree, again, I want to experience them in practice. And consulting is great for that because you can work on different functions and can consult different departments within firms in different industries. So, what a nice way to kind of have a practical master's degree. On the micro level, I think, of course, you have to differentiate between, are you a junior consultant or are you a more senior consultant within the firm, which would be like a principal or a partner. But I think for us important is the junior degree. And there you could make up a pie chart, and it would probably contain a couple of categories. The first one being you will spend lots and lots of time with Excel and PowerPoint, so get ready for that. The second one is, besides these analytical tasks, you will also have, during the process of coming up with results, you will have meetings with different stakeholders within the firm, and you're going to try to extract some knowledge from them. But you're also going to have meetings and call with external stakeholders who might be, for example, experts from your firm or experts that you hired externally, and you try to extract some more knowledge from them. The last part is probably having come up with those work results. You need to present them, and there you might, probably not within your first half year, but at some point you will be able to stand in front of committees and in front of boards and will present things and results. So it's basically, you could say three things in a pie chart. You have coming up with the results, which is the biggest part. You sit in front of your laptop, you talk, brainstorm with your colleagues. You have the second part, which is presenting those results, which can, of course, be during some board sessions, but it can be also during, I had an M&A project where it was like so many stakeholders involved. Like you have banks there, you have investors, etc. And then the third part, which is mandatory, I think, is all admin and miscellaneous stuff that goes on. So the whole traveling, right? Coming to the client side, going to the hotel in the evening or in the night, internal events with the firm, internal support. So for example, you can try to help the firm with the recruiting processes, etc. So these are the three things I would say.
Okay, but as a student, we often feel like we lack the practical skills to be actually useful in such a workplace. So maybe in the first couple of weeks or months, did you feel like you were more learning, like an intense training process, or did you feel like you were actually working already?
It's a nice question. So if you look at if you look from a purely financial perspective, I had lots of conversations about that topic with senior partners and more senior people at my firm. Within the first half year, the company is basically losing money with you because you're totally right. You're not experienced at all. There has to be some member of the team who will explain things to you, who will help you here and there. You will have trainings, trainings that last for multiple weeks that are conducted usually. So we had a training in Bangkok where it was about, basic things. How do we do stuff within our firm? So how does our standard PowerPoint style look like? How do we create business models? How do we deal with all of that stuff? So yes, indeed, I think during the first weeks and even months, sometimes it might feel like you're a burden. But of course, the more experience you were able to gain before that, so maybe you had a first internship in consulting, or you did something similar, maybe advisory at the Big Four, then of course, the more and more you do that kind of stuff, the more you're able to hit the ground running once you join full-time a strategy consulting firm and are confronted with all of these very similar tasks and problems.
Yeah, great. I mean, it makes sense since we don't have the best practices, especially for the specific firm. So you just need to get updated on everything. And maybe you can share now your favorite project or the time where you felt like you were the most useful or you could actually contribute compared to the time where you were, like, as you said, just feeling like a burden?
Yes. So actually, my favorite project and the project where I felt like I was able to contribute the most, they don't correlate. So these are two different, but I will very shortly talk about both. So my favorite project was one in Italy where we were consulting a very, very famous FMCG company. And this was one of my first projects, but I already was able to meet the CEOs, and I was able to meet the management board of the company. And without revealing what that company was, but it had a couple of problems and a couple of challenges, and these were the reasons why we were hired. But as it turned out, and that is, I found out often a reason for why companies struggle, that was really just a fight between three people in the management board who also were related. So the reasons we got hired were totally not the reasons that company was failing. And so over the next weeks, it was a lot of very highly political discussions, a lot of learnings for me, how, a big company like a really big company can struggle so much when their management board, they have small personal differences and are not able to solve these. And that was very interesting. One where I was able to add a lot of value was a project that was partly conducted in Poland. I'm half Polish, half German, and this was a company not only because of this regional focus, but also because it was a company for one of the world's largest e-commerce platforms, and I was always interested in technology, in e-commerce solutions, and so that was actually a project where I was able to contribute a lot, especially in situations where we had to think actively about new solutions. So we didn't have, sometimes consulting firms, they or you see patterns and problems that occur. So of course, always you have some kind of idea on how you could solve that problem, but sometimes you have these very raw problems that have never been solved before. That's when you require lots of creativity, lots of brainstorming sessions. So these were the instances where I was able to contribute a lot.
Okay, so now talking about the typical profile of someone who is valuable in such a network, what kind of culture and what kind of profile accommodates best the consulting industry?
Yes. So very generally, you mean what's the perfect profile for consulting?
I mean, you explain how you were able to bring your own insights, and
Yeah.
I think in which scenario would it be perceived as valuable, and in which scenario would it be perceived as maybe arrogant or inadequate?
Got it. So I don't think you have lots of instances where that would be perceived as arrogant, at least internally. So if we're looking at an internal perspective and you're with your team, you're with the partner who's in charge of the project manager who's leading the project, and then your fellow consultants, if you come up with ideas in a normal way, and you present them in a how do you say it? So you don't present them like someone who thinks he's better than the rest of the world. This will always be highly valued. What you have to be careful with, if we switch from internal to external, then sometimes sitting together with a highly experienced executive who has been doing his job for 20 or 30 years, and you tell him about some fancy new ideas you came up with, then of course this sometimes might be not a good idea, and is something that you need to be careful with. But generally, internally, depending on the firm's culture, but all sorts of ideas, even if they might seem a little bit crazy, a little bit over the top, are usually welcome.
Okay, super interesting. And now on a more macro perspective, you obviously encountered and continue to meet numerous aspiring and active consultants. And what was the common denominator between the ones you see thriving in such an industry or such a culture?
Yeah, so I think you have two things. You have the hard skills and the soft skills. And for the hard skills, it's always people who are highly structured, who are up to speed very quickly, so who are able to grasp new things very quickly, and who have this trait that we call zero defect. So they really, if I receive a financial plan from an intern that I told him to come up with, I'm 100% sure what's inside is zero defect. So we don't have any errors with the formulas. We don't have any logical errors in the calculation. And so these three things on the hard skill side, able to grasp new things very quickly. They grasp it in a highly structured way. And when they work on these things, they show zero defect. Soft skills, I think the people that I saw strive the most are not the ones who are super extrovert, but the ones who have a reasonable balance and who are outgoing while still being extremely professional. And these I think were the people that I saw strive the most.
Yeah, interesting, because we would sometimes assume that we need to be extremely well or extremely at ease with communication, but on the other hand, you also need to be very thoughtful and to just work on the details.
Right, totally.
Yeah, now talking about the industry in general, so how do you think the industry is evolving with new technologies and maybe intelligent artificial intelligence and everything?
Oh, I think it's evolving a lot. So in the past, consulting was a very easy job because knowledge was not readily available. And so that means basically the information asymmetries between firms and institutions or experts who had a lot of knowledge on different issues, they were huge. Nowadays we have the internet, we have knowledge platforms, we have networks of experts that you can hire for, a couple of $100 or $1,000. And all of these things help to get this information asymmetry to a much smaller level. So that's one very general thing the consulting companies are fighting with. The second thing is this thing called technology, right? So the whole digitization that's going on, and that's one big reason big firms and big corporates are struggling with. It's a two-sided sword or two-bladed sword. I don't know how to say that, but it has positive and negative effects for the consulting companies. The positive effect is, of course, if those firms have problems, that means there's business. The negative thing is many consulting firms are not that innovative and digital themselves, right? So how the hell are they supposed to tell those corporates how to do it better? You have some exceptions, I would say, but most of the consulting firms work in a very traditional and old-fashioned way. So the core of the business hasn't changed for many, many years. So what these consulting firms now are trying to do, of course, is rejuvenate themselves by acquiring different startups and young companies, sometimes big data companies, that they then, try to utilize within their own business model. So I think these are important reasons why it's at least a very challenging market for consulting companies. And to give like a very practical example, very precise example, you also have these consulting marketplaces popping up. So more and more firms have the option of actually getting former strategy consultants for their projects, for their internal problems, without having to actually hire a strategy consulting firm. And that's something that came along with technology too, right? So they can get these these former consultants or these freelance consultants. They can hire some experts who are on the numerous expert platforms for expert calls, or can even fly them in and have them at their sites for a couple of days. So they are not that reliant on consulting companies anymore. How is that going to evolve going forward? I have no idea. So I think consulting companies will further try to rejuvenate themselves. So there will be more acquisitions in the space, or acquisitions also of smaller players, but also acquisitions between the consulting firms themselves. So basically a consolidation of the market. And then let's see, it's a very exciting time. I think for now, for the next couple of years, there will be still strong demand, and we see the consulting market growing and growing year over year. So for everyone who is listening to this or is watching this video, you probably will not have any problems if you intend to enter the consulting market. Just on a very long-term basis, there's lots and lots of challenges for consulting companies to overcome.
Yeah, totally. And you also mentioned the after consulting career. So for example, solo consulting or independent consulting. But before talking about the exit opportunities, maybe you can just share with our listeners or just viewers where they can find you online, or maybe just reach out to you or learn more about your insights.
Yeah, so I'm to be found online on YouTube. So if you search YouTube for Management Consulting Insights, my channel should pop up. Also, if you look for my name, Kevin Jon, you will find me either on YouTube or on Instagram at the Kevin Jon, Jon, so without an H. But one place that I'm becoming more and more active is LinkedIn actually right now. So maybe we might put a link to my LinkedIn account somewhere, but that's where I'm also trying to be, more active. I'm not a social media guy per se. So I have, it's more and getting more and more of work here in China, and lots of things that keep me busy at night. But I try to, stay in touch with the people that are following me already, and at least try to maintain what I do online.
Yep, and you have a pretty interesting community on LinkedIn as well. You have a group where people can exchange about their interview opportunities, or maybe just asking specific questions. And I thought that was highly valuable for people to just connect on specific common challenges.
Right, yes.
So now just wrapping up on the after consulting journey, so the exit opportunities, because you've done something similar yourself. Maybe you can just share a bit more specifics on your current adventure, and just explain how you see consultant evolving after their consulting career.
Mm-hmm. So you have two things. Basically, you have two variations. So either you're a very junior guy exiting the industry, or you're a more senior guy. Let's talk about senior first, because that's very easy. If you're a partner at a firm, actually the chances or the exit opportunities are fewer than if you're a junior guy. What you do if you're a partner is one of two things, mostly, of course. You either have lateral career changes, so you might go from McKinsey to BCG as an example, or you start your own consulting practice. You have some solid clients that you have been working with for the last couple of years, and you think to yourself, why should I share these clients with the firm that I'm working for right now? I'm going to be self-employed from now on, going to hire a couple of guys who help me. And these two are the most common. Of course, I also have a couple of examples, some of them my friends who were senior guys, partners at the firm, and they started startups. And that's also always something that I have high respect for, because these people, of course, they earn a good amount of money, and then to say, kind of screw all of this, I'm going to start my own thing. That's a big, big jump, especially if you're already, 40, for example. But that's not very common. On the junior level, I would say 4 things. The first one being industry, the second one being startup, the third one being private equity, and then, yes, venture capital is part of private equity, but the fourth one, in fact, is going to be venture capital as a separate category. So industry, I think, is a very, very common thing. So, you're working with corporates every day. And I also had a couple of job offers from corporates that I was working with, where I was there for a couple of months. You get to know the project manager on the corporate side. You get to know the senior management. And if you do a good job, then of course they are very interested in having you join their company and helping them with their challenges. So that's something very, very common. You usually earn a little bit more than what you've earned before, but you work way less, okay? And that's something very appealing to a lot of consultants. Startup is also very common. So I saw many of my colleagues quitting their job and then successfully starting their own ventures within, every imaginable industry. And the fact that most of these guys are very young makes this a very, very solid option, right? Everything's open and you have your whole life in front of you, so why not take the risk and start something exciting? PE, also very common, because most of the times you have a big jump in salary. Your salary goes up significantly. If you, of course, if you participate in deals where you have so-called carry, it will be even better. So in terms of salary development, it's very attractive. And even in terms of working hours that you have to put in, many of my friends who work in private equity right now, they work less than what they worked in strategy consulting. It's not as little as, if you have a 9-to-5 job at some kind of corporate, but it's probably a little bit less than during the high phases of consulting projects. And then something you don't see that often, but that's very popular among the recent generation is venture capital. So a consultant is not the ideal hiring profile for VC funds. Consultants usually don't have enough founding experience. They don't have enough experience with investors. Some of them have, if they have worked in an M&A practice of a consulting firm, but usually not. But that's something I also saw a couple of times. Me personally, I had the big advantage that I had founded a couple of things before, one of them being this funding accelerator, which I was doing at least during the end of my consulting career parallelly to it. So I was able to build a good network with lots of VCs, with lots of investors, but also learn to build a deal flow, to establish good deal flow of highly interesting startups that you could potentially invest in. And that helped me get into this, further develop myself into this venture capital industry and finally take the leap and get into one of the probably most exciting markets of the world right now, which is China and my favorite city, Shanghai.
Great. Thanks for sharing all these insights. And maybe as a last question regarding your very entrepreneurial profile. What's the impact, or what's your current ambition, let's say professionally? So you said you want to build a bridge between China and Europe, but have you thought about something else, maybe further down the line?
You think about a big vision for what I'm doing here right now?
Yeah, exactly.
I want to push innovation forward. So I think we have a big information asymmetry between China and the rest of the world. These guys here are doing, on the one hand, they are doing highly interesting and, highly innovative stuff. They are, in some perspectives, they are much further and much more innovative than anything in America or the Europe you can imagine. On the other hand side, they are still, China is still lacking behind in many other areas. And there's also lots of exaggeration. So I always see these people on LinkedIn who are posting about great new technologies being invented here. And sometimes I know some of these startup founders personally, or I have good connections to some of the people who are in charge of these technologies. And I know that there are still lots and lots of challenges until these technologies are ripe for mass utilization in the market. So it's actually not everything here is perfect. But as a matter of fact, yes, there's positive and there's negative, but China is so disconnected from Europe and from the USA in terms of information flow. And I think the huge value lies in between further connecting these countries and these ecosystems. And if you want to have a positive impact on the world and you want to work on highly innovative problems and challenges, this is a great way to do it and kind of to leave a mark on the earth. I'm probably not going to do that forever, but it's a great learning ground. I'm working with so many different people. I'm working with so many different cultures, and ultimately this will enable me to take the next step afterwards.
Great. So as we understood, you're all about learning, and you've done your really steep learning curve in the consulting world. Now you're expanding to the Asia ecosystem, and now we'll see in the future what you'll develop. So very interesting, very, very interesting having you here on the podcast. Thank you very much for your time and your insights. And I'm sure we'll have further opportunities to exchange some insights and value in the future.
Sure, Romain, was a pleasure to talk to you.